The preamble of the Declaration of Independence reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed." Now here's the line, "that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and their happiness." Now, these documents are all put together. They're in Washington in our government buildings. Some of them are on display to this day. But there's something I want to go back to. I want to go back to what triggered the colonies to want independence from the king. Because weren't they happy? Wasn't everybody touchy-feely and lovey-lovey? No. But let me just give you a list of things right here. These are the grievances that the American colonies had against the King of England. Pay careful attention while I read them now. The colonists said about the king, "He has made judges dependent on his will alone for their tenure and their office. He has called legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has erected a multitude of new offices, sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign of our own Constitution." Keep reading. "For he has imposed taxes upon us without our consent. He is taking away our charters and abolishing our most valuable laws. He has excited domestic insurrection among us. Today we call this class warfare. They, the leaders, have been deaf to the voice of justice. We, being assembled, appear to the supreme judge of the world." July 4, 1776, final quote. "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence." Now, for the ACLU folks, that is a reference to God. We multiply pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I have in my possession a copy of the king's response to the colonists' writing, to their declaration. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how the king looked at those Americans that are our founders. The colonists were accused of forcefully laboring to inflame people by gross misrepresentations. The king said the colonists now openly avow their revolt, hostility, and rebellion, and they are assuming powers to themselves. The king said the colonists are promoters of this desperate conspiracy that has been conducted using differences of our intentions. The colonists, according to the king, are criminal combinations that dwell among them, and I hope they discern the treacherous views of the people they're following. The colonists, according to the king, had foreign alliances that are standing with me to defeat these rebels that the king called a deluded multitude. In other words, those that wanted freedom, those that were willing to fight for freedom and stand against the Pharaoh spirit of the King of England were called rebels and were called a deluded multitude. Now, you know, America throughout its history has had protests. The Civil War was a protest that led to a war. The Revolutionary War was a protest, and it led to the Revolutionary War. I remember living in Arlington, Virginia during the Vietnam War. They called it the hippie movement and the burning of the flag and the marches. So throughout American history, it is common for there to be differences of opinion. That's what America is about. We are a diversified nation, a mixed multitude, and we have a constitutional right to agree with the preacher or not agree, to agree with the governor or not agree, to agree with decisions out of Congress or to not agree. But it seems to me that it's 1776 1966 all over again. Why do I say that? Because the common people that are simply raising up because of decisions they are concerned about that legislators are passing in the House and the Congress. If you're a Tea Party protester, I quote, you are right-winged, you are a white racist, and you are a rabble-rouser. If you are a health care protester, I quote, you are anti-American, you are a liar, and you are dangerous and hostile. If you are against the bailouts, then you are, quote, criminals, and you are dangerous, you have a dangerous view toward America. If you're against high taxes, you've been called a Nazi, you have been called dangerous, and you have been called threatening. Now here's the question I would like to say to you. Is it possible that the dreams of our founding fathers has now become the nightmare along Pennsylvania Avenue? Now for a few moments, let me ask you a question. What was the vision of our founders? I have seen it and believe it's a four-part vision. The first part was a government that would be formed where the people would be in control of who they elected to represent them. Number two, a government that permitted religious freedom without the government interfering in religion. Now, if you sing a Christmas carol, if you stand up and say a prayer in public, you are probably going to be sued by a four-letter word in America called the ACLU. Now, it's interesting that one of the things they always want to throw at your face is separation of church and state. Now, some of the elitists apparently have never read the Constitution because they think separation of church and state is in the Constitution. I still hear them get on TV and talk about it's against the Constitution because the Constitution teaches separation of church and state. For your information, the phrase separation of church and state was written first in 1802 to a letter of Thomas Jefferson, from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist organization, talking about the First Amendment to the Constitution that creates a wall of separation between church and state. It's not in the Constitution. It is from a letter Thomas Jefferson wrote. And if you want to get specific, let's just read what the Constitution says. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. Watch this. This is the part they leave out. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In other words, the Constitution is not freedom. It's not freedom from religion. It's freedom of religion. Not from, of. Now, let me ask you a question. What did our founders know when you read their writings? I have many historical books. I have books by all the presidents, their biographies that go way back to Washington and Grant. And sometimes I'll pull those out to read it. What was it that they knew? Why did our founders set checks and balances in our documents? Why did they make laws ensuring that no one single branch of the government could overpower and take over everything, that you had to have three branches that had to work together and balance themselves out? Here's the four things they knew from my research. Number one, they were experts of ancient history, such as the empires of Greece and Rome. Number two, they understood, now you better listen to this, that democracies never last, and eventually they all in history became corrupt. Number three, they understood, they wrote to future generations warning them that if you don't watch yourself, your freedoms could be taken and lost by your own government. They knew about the balance of power. Now, this is a strong word, but think about the King of England, who was a monarchy, who controlled everything. They knew that it was possible that without the preamble of the Declaration of Independence reads, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. Now here's the line, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and their happiness. Now, these documents are all put together. They're in Washington in our government